Nobody in Hollow Ridge had expected Caleb Harmon to come back. Not after 3 years of silence. Not after the way he had left. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. He rode in on a gray morning when the dust was still low and the town hadn't fully woken yet. His horse was tired. He looked tired too, but there was something in the way he sat in the saddle, straight-backed, unhurried, that told anyone watching he hadn't come back by accident. He had thought about this ride for a long time. Caleb was 31 years old, lean from years of working other men's land across the territory. He had left Hollow Ridge with nothing but a bedroll, a horse, and a wound that didn't show on the outside. A wound that lived somewhere deep behind his ribs, the kind that never quite heals because you never quite understand how you got it. He had written one letter before leaving. One careful, honest letter. The kind of man writes only once in his life, when he finally decides that pride isn't worth more than the person he's losing. He had addressed it to May Calloway. He had given it to his brother Daniel to post. He had never received a reply. For 3 years, he had told himself she had chosen silence, that she had read his words and decided against him. It was a hard thing to carry, but he had carried it. He had worked, moved on, taken jobs in towns where no one knew his name. He had tried, in the quiet way stubborn men try, to forget her. Oh, how he had tried. Then, 2 months ago, a traveling merchant passing through the ranch where Caleb worked had mentioned Hollow Ridge in passing, had mentioned that the Calloway girl was engaged now, getting married in the spring to a man named Roy Finch. Settled man, owned a hardware store. Caleb had set down his coffee and looked out at the flat horizon for a long time. He told himself it didn't matter. He went back to work. He lasted exactly 11 days before he saddled up and rode. The town looked the same, mostly. The general store had a new coat of paint. The livery had expanded. But the layout of the streets, the smell of the morning air, the particular way the wind came off the hills to the east, all of it settled over him like something familiar and uncomfortable. The way an old coat fits when you've changed shape since you last wore it. He stabled his horse and walked to the only boarding house in town, a narrow 2-story building run by a widow named Mrs. Clara Hobbs. She recognized him immediately and had the grace not to make a show of it. "Room's 4 bits a night," she said, handing him a key without being asked if he wanted one. "Much obliged," he said. He didn't ask about May. Not yet. He saw her the next morning. She was coming out of the dry goods store with a basket over one arm, talking to an older woman beside her, laughing at something. She hadn't seen him yet. He had a few seconds to simply look at her, which he knew was more than he deserved. May Calloway was the kind of woman who didn't change much on the outside, but changed enormously underneath. She had the same dark hair, the same careful posture, the same quiet habit of tucking a loose strand behind her ear when she was thinking. But there was something settled about her now, a composure that hadn't quite been there at 24. He wasn't sure if it was peace or resignation, and he wasn't sure which of those would be harder to face. Then she turned and saw him. The laugh stopped, not dramatically, just quietly, the way a candle goes out when a door opens. She looked at him for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then she nodded. Once, the way you nod at someone you once knew well and have since rearranged yourself around. "Caleb," she said. "May," he said. That was all. The older woman beside her glanced between them with the alert curiosity of someone who could sense a history without knowing the details. May said something polite to the woman, and then she walked past Caleb without stopping. He stood on the boardwalk and watched her go. He hadn't expected warmth, but the nod had been worse somehow, precise and controlled, the kind of greeting you practice in the mirror the night before. Don't go anywhere, because what Caleb is about to discover about his own brother will break your heart and change everything. Part 2 is coming, and you will not see it coming. Caleb spent that first day reacquainting himself with the town, which mostly meant sitting at the counter of the diner drinking coffee, until people stopped pretending not to look at him. Word traveled fast in small places. By noon, most of Hollow Ridge knew he was back. By mid-afternoon, his brother Daniel knew. Daniel Harmon was 2 years younger than Caleb and had always occupied space differently. Louder, quicker to smile, easier to like at first meeting. He had done well for himself since Caleb left. Ran a small freighting operation out of the edge of town, had a wife and a young son. He looked prosperous and comfortable in the way that some men do when the competition quietly removes itself. He found Caleb at the boarding house just before supper. "Didn't think you'd come back," Daniel said from the doorway. "Didn't think I would either," Caleb said. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. There was something careful in his expression, the kind of careful that looks like ease but isn't. "You here for the Calloway girl?" Caleb looked at him. "What makes you say that?" "Because I know you," Daniel said. "And because there's nothing else here for you." It was said plainly, almost gently, and Caleb let it sit without answering. He had not yet decided how much he wanted to say to his brother. There were things he needed to understand first, things that had been bothering him more and more on the long ride here. He had written one letter. He had handed it to Daniel personally, and May had never replied. Not a word, not a line, not even a message passed through someone else. He had assumed her silence was an answer. But now, sitting across from his brother and watching that careful expression, a different possibility was beginning to take shape. He didn't sleep well that night. He lay in the narrow boarding house bed and looked at the ceiling and turned the question over the way you turn a stone to see what's underneath it. Daniel had been the one to post the letter. Daniel had always liked May. Caleb had known that, had noticed it, and set it aside because Daniel was his brother, and some things you simply trusted. You handed your brother a letter, and you trusted it would be sent. But what if it hadn't been? It was not a comfortable thought. It opened up 3 years of quiet grief and reframed it into something with edges. He reached into his coat and took out a letter. Not his letter. He had never gotten that back. This was a different one. A letter he had found 2 months ago, tucked inside an old book Daniel had lent him years before, which had followed Caleb from town to town in a crate of things. A letter in Daniel's handwriting. Unfinished. Unsent. A draft of something Daniel had started writing and stopped. Caleb had only read the first few lines before folding it back up. He hadn't let himself read the rest. Not yet, because once he read it, he would know, and knowing would change everything. He folded the letter carefully and put it back in his coat pocket. Outside, Hollow Ridge was quiet. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at something in the dark. The wind moved through the gap under the window with a low, persistent sound, like something asking to be let in. Morning came gray and slow, the way it does in early spring when the land isn't sure yet whether winter has finished with it. Caleb was up before the sun, sitting on the edge of his bed with his boots already on, the letter still in his coat pocket. He had made a decision somewhere between midnight and dawn. Not a dramatic one, just a quiet settling. The way a man decides to stop avoiding a thing he has been walking around for too long. He was going to read the rest of Daniel's unfinished letter today. He found a bench at the far end of the main street, away from foot traffic, where an old oak tree had grown close enough to the fence line to provide some shade. He sat down, reached into his coat, and took out the folded letter. He opened it slowly, the way you open something you cannot unopen. Daniel's handwriting was loose and slanted, the kind of handwriting that moves fast because the hand is trying to keep up with something urgent. The letter was dated 3 years ago, within weeks of the time Caleb had left Hollow Ridge. And then Caleb read it. Every word. Daniel wrote about May, about how he had watched her for years while Caleb, in his words, took her for granted, about how he had convinced himself that Caleb wasn't right for her. Too restless, too proud, too likely to leave her waiting. About how he had told himself, when Caleb handed him that letter to post, that he was doing everyone a favor. He had not posted it. He had kept it. And when Caleb left without waiting for a reply that was never going to come, Daniel had let the silence do its work. But May had not turned to Daniel. She had kept to herself for a long time. And when she finally moved on, it had been toward Roy Finch, a quiet man who had nothing to do with the Harmon family at all. Daniel's patience had earned him nothing. The letter ended mid-sentence, as though he had stopped and put the pen down and never picked it up again. Caleb sat with the paper in his hands for a long time. The anger came, but not the way he expected. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of anger that sits low in the chest, heavy and still. The kind that doesn't have anywhere useful to go. His brother had taken something from him. Not violently, not with any cruelty that showed on the surface. Just quietly, with a careful hand and a patient smile. The way small thefts happen when no one is watching. 3 years. He had spent 3 years believing May had chosen silence over him. He had rearranged his entire life around that belief, taken it as a verdict on who he was, what he was worth to her, and all of it had been built on a letter that never arrived. Stay with me, because what Caleb does next, what he says to his brother, and what he decides about May, that is where this story truly begins. Part 3 will open something you won't be ready for. He folded Daniel's draft carefully and put it back in his pocket. He didn't crumple it, didn't tear it. He was going to need it. He found Daniel at midday outside the freighting office on the edge of town. Daniel was talking to one of his workers when he noticed Caleb approaching. Something shifted in his expression. Slight, quick, gone before most people would have caught it. But Caleb had grown up watching his brother's face, and he caught it clearly. "Got a minute?" Caleb said. Daniel said something to the worker, who moved off. They stood together in the narrow strip of shade along the side of the building. Daniel had his thumbs hooked in his belt, a posture that looked relaxed but wasn't. "Found something in one of your old books," Caleb said. He didn't take out the letter yet. He just watched his brother's face. Daniel said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, "What kind of something?" "The kind you write when you're trying to talk yourself into believing you did the right thing." The silence between them stretched. A wagon rolled past on the street. Daniel looked down at his boots, then back up. His jaw was tight. "I'm not here to fight you," Caleb said, and he meant it. Not because he wasn't angry, but because anger wasn't going to give him back 3 years. "I just needed you to know that I know." Daniel looked at him with something complicated moving behind his eyes. Not quite guilt and not quite defiance. Something in between. The expression of a man who had known for a long time that a particular day was coming and had never figured out what he would say when it arrived. "She didn't choose me anyway," Daniel said finally. It came out quieter than he probably intended, and it landed between them like something meant to be an explanation, but wasn't quite. "That's not the point," Caleb said. Daniel nodded slowly. He knew it wasn't. Caleb left him standing there and walked back toward the center of town. He had said what he came to say. The rest of it was still ahead of him. The harder question was May. She was engaged. The wedding was in spring. Whatever had existed between them 3 years ago had been left unfinished through no fault of her own. But time had moved regardless. She had built a life around his absence, the way people do. Roy Finch was not a bad man by any account he had heard. He was steady, present, and had never disappeared on anyone. Caleb had no right to walk into her life and overturn it simply because he now understood why things had gone the way they had. And yet, the letter he had written 3 years ago was still out there somewhere. Either Daniel had destroyed it, or it was sitting in a drawer in his house, forgotten or kept. May had never read a single word of it. She had made her peace with his silence she believed was his choice, when it had never been his choice at all. She deserved to know that much. Not so he could reclaim something, just because the truth belonged to her. "Are you feeling this? Because I need you to stay right here with me." What happens when Caleb finally sits across from May and says the words he's been holding for 3 years. Part 4 will stay with you long after it's over. He found his opportunity the following afternoon. May came into the diner while he was finishing a late lunch. She was alone this time. He didn't let himself decide whether that was chance or something else. She saw him immediately, and for a moment he thought she might turn and leave. Instead, she walked to the counter, ordered a cup of coffee, and sat 2 seats down from him with the particular posture of a woman who has decided to be civil. They sat in silence for a moment. 3 days, May said finally, looking at her coffee cup. "People are talking. People talked when I left too," he said. She looked at him then, directly, with the kind of look that doesn't have any performance in it. "Why did you come back, Caleb?" He had thought about how to answer this. He had turned it over many times. But sitting beside her now, with the weight of what he knew pressing against his ribs, the careful answer he had prepared felt dishonest. "Because I found out something I should have known 3 years ago," he said. She watched him, waiting. "I wrote you a letter," he said, "before I left. I gave it to Daniel to post." Something moved across her face, slow and careful, like ice shifting on a river in early spring, barely visible. "But there, I never received a letter," she said quietly. "I know that now," he said. The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. It had weight and texture. May set her coffee cup down with a steadiness that looked practiced and looked straight ahead at the wall behind the counter for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was even and composed. But it cost her something to make it that way. "What did the letter say?" Caleb looked at her. Outside, the wind moved through the street. A loose board somewhere rattled once and went quiet. "Everything I should have said before I ever thought about leaving," he said. May didn't say anything for a long time after that. She sat with both hands wrapped around her coffee cup, looking at the wall in front of her. Not blank, but carefully composed. The way a person looks when something unexpected has arrived, and they need a moment before they decide how to receive it. Caleb didn't push. He had said what he came to say, and he understood that the rest of it belonged to her. Finally, she said, "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because it's yours," he said. "The truth is yours. I'm not here to ask you for anything. I just couldn't let you keep believing I chose silence. Because I never did. Not for a single day." She looked at him then, just briefly, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there, she kept to herself. She finished her coffee, set a coin on the counter, and stood. She straightened her coat with quiet, unhurried movements. Then she said, "I need to think." And she walked out. Caleb stayed in Hollow Ridge. He didn't announce his intentions to anyone. He took small work where he could find it. Helped a rancher 2 miles out repair a section of fence. Split wood for Mrs. Hobbs in exchange for a reduced rate on his room. He saw May at the general store on a Thursday morning. They exchanged a few words about nothing important. The weather, the state of the road north. It lasted perhaps 2 minutes. But when she turned to leave, she paused. "Did Daniel ever give you back your letter?" she asked. "No," he said. She nodded slowly, as though this confirmed something she had already suspected. Then she left. He went to Daniel that evening. His brother answered the door with the weary expression of a man who had been waiting for a second conversation and hadn't decided yet whether he was ready for it. Caleb didn't step inside. He stood on the porch and spoke plainly. "Do you still have it?" Daniel held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. He disappeared inside for a few minutes. When he came back, he was holding a folded envelope, worn at the edges and slightly yellowed with time. He held it out without a word. Caleb took it. He looked at it for a moment. His own handwriting on the front. May's name, the address. All of it exactly as he had left it 3 years ago. Sealed, undelivered. He didn't say anything to Daniel. There wasn't much left to say. He left it at the boarding house with Mrs. Hobbs the following morning before he went to work with a simple instruction. If May Calloway came by, she was to have it. No message attached. No explanation. Just the letter itself, which already contained everything he had ever meant to say. He spent the day at the ranch outside town, working the fence line under a pale sky that couldn't quite decide whether to offer sun or cloud. He worked steadily and didn't let himself think too much. There is a particular mercy in physical labor, the way it occupies just enough of the mind to keep the restless parts quiet. By the time he rode back into town that evening, the light was going gold and low across the rooftops. He stabled his horse, washed up at the pump behind the boarding house, and went inside. Mrs. Hobbs was sitting in her usual chair by the front window with her sewing. She looked up when he came in. "Young woman came by this afternoon," she said. "Did she take it?" he asked. "She did," Mrs. Hobbs said. And then, after a pause that contained considerably more than it showed, she added, "She sat on the front step for a while after she read it." Something inside Caleb's chest did a thing he didn't have a word for. Not hope exactly. Heavier than that. More fragile. He nodded. He went upstairs to his room. He sat on the edge of the bed and pressed his hands together and looked at the floor for a long time. "I need you to come back for part 5. Because what May decides, what she says when she finally comes to find him, and what becomes of everything that was stolen from them, it will remind you that some things arrive late and still arrive exactly when they were meant to. Don't miss the ending." He didn't see May for 2 days after that. 2 days of waking before sunrise and lying still, listening to the town breathe. 2 days of work and coffee and the long aching patience of a man who has said everything he can say and must now simply wait inside the silence he made. On the third day, she came. Mrs. Hobbs showed her to the small sitting room off the front hallway and came to get Caleb without commentary. He found May standing by the window, looking out at the street. She turned when he came in. She had the letter in her hand. Folded and refolded, so many times the creases had gone soft. "I read it," she said. "I figured," he said. She looked down at the letter for a moment, then back up at him. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, but carried something underneath it. Something she wasn't trying to hide, so much as simply manage. "I waited for you, Caleb. For a long time. When nothing came, I thought—" She stopped. "I thought it meant what silence usually means." "I know," he said. "I thought the same about yours." The room was very still. Outside, someone was moving along the boardwalk, boots loud on the planks and then gone. "I'm engaged," she said. Not defensively, just clearly. The way a person states a fact they need to keep in view. "I know that too," he said. She looked at him with the same directness she had always had, the quality he had always respected about her. She never made you guess what she was thinking when she had decided to show you. "Then what do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said. And then, because that wasn't entirely honest, he said, "I wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to know that I didn't choose silence. That I wrote down everything I felt and I trusted the wrong person with it. I spent 3 years paying for that. You deserve to know that the silence wasn't mine." May looked at him for a long moment. Then she sat down in the chair by the window, slowly, as if some of the steadiness had gone out her legs. "Roy is a good man," she said quietly. "I believe you," Caleb said. "He's never given me a reason to doubt him." "That matters," Caleb said. And he meant it. She looked down at the letter again. "But I didn't love him the way—" She stopped herself. Her jaw tightened slightly. She refolded the letter along its worn creases. "I need more time," she said finally. "You have it," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. Not this time. Tell me in the comments if this story reached something inside you. And if you've ever waited for a word that never came, if you've ever carried a silence that wasn't yours to carry, share your story below. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about holding on, letting go, and finding your way back to what was always meant to be yours. What happened in the weeks that followed was not a dramatic unraveling. Life in small towns rarely moves that cleanly. May did not immediately break things off with Roy Finch. She did not fall back into step with Caleb, as though 3 years were easily undone. She was too careful for that, and too honest. But things shifted the way ground shifts after a long rain, slowly, invisibly, and then all at once. Roy, a perceptive man despite his quiet manner, noticed a change in May before she said anything to him. He asked her directly one evening, the way steady men do when they have decided they would rather know than wonder. She told him the truth, because she was not the kind of woman who could do otherwise. It was a hard conversation. Roy did not take it easily, but he took it with dignity, which said something about who he was. Caleb heard about it secondhand, the way you hear most things in a small town. He was splitting wood behind the boarding house when May came to find him on a quiet Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after she had read the letter. She walked around the side of the building and stopped a few feet away and looked at him in the clear morning light. He set down the axe. She didn't make a speech. May had never been a woman for speeches. She simply said, "I think we have some things to talk about. Properly this time. If you're willing." "I've been willing for 3 years," he said. Something in her face softened. Not dramatically. Not with tears. Not with grand gestures. Just a small, quiet release. The kind that comes when a door opens that has been shut for too long. The kind that makes a person breathe differently, like they've been holding something in their chest for so long they forgot it didn't have to be there. "Then let's start there," she said. "As for Daniel, that was a longer road. Brotherhood is not a thing that breaks cleanly, even when trust has been damaged. There were months of distance, of conversations that went short and careful. Daniel never offered a full explanation for what he had done, perhaps because there wasn't one that would hold up to honest examination. But one evening in late autumn, he came to find Caleb at the small house Caleb had begun renting on the edge of town, and he sat across from him at the table and said simply, "I'm sorry. I knew it was wrong when I did it, and I did it anyway." That's all I can tell you. It wasn't enough, but it was true. And sometimes truth is the only place two people can start from. Caleb looked at his brother across the table for a long moment, thinking about 3 years on other men's land, carrying a verdict that had never been delivered. Then he said, "Don't do anything like that again." Daniel nodded. They didn't speak again that night, but Daniel came back the following week, and the week after that. And slowly, the way broken things sometimes do when both sides are willing to be patient, something began to repair itself. The letter May kept, not on display, not in a place of importance, but in the drawer of the small table beside her bed, where she kept the things that mattered quietly. Caleb never asked for it back. It had always been hers. He had just needed it to reach her. 3 years late, worn at the edges, still sealed with the same care, he had pressed into it on the night he wrote it. Some things arrive late, and still arrive exactly right on time.